So what happens to America if Donald Trump gets reelected? How deep and existential will that damage be? Check it out. And be sure to subscribe to our channel, ding the bell, leave your comments, and share this with your friends. What could be the worst outcome? What do you think could be the worst outcome? Would it be a further transfer of wealth from the middle class to the very rich? Would it be greater and greater student debt burdens on working people? Would it be the acceleration or the destruction of our environment? I mean, these are all things that I think are fairly predictable that would happen if Republicans continue to control our government, and if they continue to control the majority of our states, by the way, and Trump takes the White House. Will he launch a final assault on the news media? I mean, he's you know, yesterday or the day before, he was basically tweeting at a right-wing billionaire who owns I think it's $3.6 billion worth of, well, I'm doing this off the top of my head. I shouldn't do that. But anyway, this right-wing billionaire controls a large chunk of AT&T stock. AT&T controls CNN. So, you know, Trump is saying, yeah, you know, CNN is bad. You know, let's turn them into Fox News. Are we going to see all of our media turn into Fox News? I mean, it slowly seems to be happening. You know, stories just are not, frankly, being reported in context. Will McConnell's judges with lifetime appointments kneecap enforcement against white-collar crime? We already saw this, you know, with the so-called criminal justice reform. It didn't actually have anything to do with the vast majority of people in prison. It affected, you know, a couple thousand people with marijuana convictions in federal prisons. Well, I'm not even sure mostly it was white-collar crime. I mean, and it made it a lot harder to go after corporate CEOs. That was the criminal justice reform. But, you know, what are these corrupt judges going to be doing? How much damage will be done by the Trump war on science and the Republican war on science? You know, whether it's getting in bed with evangelicals and saying that there's no such thing as evolution, or whether it's getting in bed with the fossil fuel industry and saying that there's no such thing as global climate change, or if it does, it's just a natural phenomenon. You know, it doesn't matter how many billions of tons of carbon we've thrown into the atmosphere in the last 150 years. Will the religious fundamentalists, the Jerry Falwell Jr.'s and Franklin Grahams of the world, step up their campaign to burrow deeply into our political parties, particularly the Republican Party, and further subvert the separation of church and state? These guys have been proudly preaching politics from the pulpit, basically since President Obama was elected, in these white evangelical churches, and defying the IRS. You know, you're supposed to lose your tax-exempt status if you do this. And they're like, you know, just, you know, I dare you. In fact, a bunch of them, there was a day back, you know, this was when President Obama was in office, there was a day where they all did it on the same Sunday, intentionally. Like they signed an agreement, you know, a pledge. Yes, we will talk politics in the pulpit. You know, we dare you, Obama. And of course, you know, the Obama administration didn't do anything about it, and the Trump administration obviously won't do anything about it. So how much worse could that get? Will the world be plunged into war with Iran or Venezuela? Trump right now, we have troops on the border of Venezuela. Trump is pushing Venezuela really hard. He's trying to topple Maduro. Oh my God, the guy's a socialist. His sanctions are causing real pain in both those countries. You know, Bolton leaving, I suppose, gives us a little encouragement in that regard, but I'm not sure how much. Netanyahu this morning announced some new annexation of Palestinian territories in Israel. This is probably not going to go over well in Israel with the Palestinians, and you know, is this going to further inflame the region? This is part of Netanyahu's, I mean, he's up for his election is next week, I believe. And, you know, so he's reaching out to the hard right in Israel, the same way that Trump is reaching out to the hard right here in the United States. So could we be looking at a war? Will the government, you know, how Trump has got his own little police agency, his own little kind of SS in ICE going out and seizing immigrants and throwing them in for-profit detention centers where, you know, these big for-profit corporations, you and I, our tax dollars are paying them $750 a day to hold these undocumented immigrants. Is Trump going to turn that fire on progressives, on liberals? They're laying the ground for this right now across right-wing media, talking about the violence of Antifa. You know, if you're opposed to fascism, you're violent. Is their shtick. And then they go out and try and provoke violence and then complain about it. So will they begin rounding up liberals? Are they going to be looking at your Facebook page to see who you support? How might Trump's privatized prisons and concentration camps be expanded? And who might he be trying to put them into in order to generate more profit for his billionaire buddies and, hey, special bonus, get rid of his political opponents? How about the pesticides? You know, there's this pesticide that was supposed to be banned last year, or maybe it was early this year, because it's a potent neurotoxin. It damages children's nervous systems. And the Trump administration said, we don't care. You know, they got heavily lobbied by the pesticide industry. It's a very profitable pesticide, apparently, cheap to make, expensive to sell. And now it's being sprayed on you know, millions of acres of our food. How much more toxic is our environment going to get? How many more bees are going to die? And all pollinators, for that matter. What about his deregulation of pollution? You know, rolling back the CAFE standards, the car emission standards, so that cars and diesel trucks can blow more soot and more exhaust and more poison and more carbon into the atmosphere, so that, you know, Americans, I think the number was $16 billion that it's estimated that Americans will spend if the increase in fuel standards does not go through. Americans, you know, in other words, if we go along with Trump's cutback on these fuel standards and these emission standards, you and I, well, actually, I drive a car that has a gasoline engine. It's a Prius electric plug-in, but the first 30 miles is all electric, and I don't think I've bought one tank of gas all year. Maybe one, maybe two. Louise and I drove up towards Seattle once and over to the seacoast once, and those are the only times we've used gasoline all year. But, you know, that most people are using gasoline, and you know, that is going to get more, you know, that expense will continue if we don't make cars more efficient. And not to mention the explosion of cancer and other diseases. You see all these ads on TV for things that deal with asthma and all these autoimmune disorders where the immune system is just going nuts. You know, there's a fair amount of evidence that this is like all tied into a toxic environment around us. How much worse will things get if the Republicans retain control? Will there be further tax cuts for the billionaires? Will wages on working people continue to decline? Will the war on unions be doubled down on? You know, virtually all the jobs that have been created since Donald Trump came into office have been either part-time jobs or jobs with no benefits and where people are working at will, basically, you know, gig kind of jobs. Very, very few, you know, good jobs with real benefits and you know, you can expect to work there for multiple years. Very few of those kind of jobs have been created now. How much worse is that going to get? What am I missing here?